Hi, this is Archana Bahuguna. This is part 2 of the presentation about building a web app. We were talking about when the response is when you're defining a minimal Flask application, and this is the code for that. You're defining a mapping between the URL that you type on the client side and the function that it wants to map to. So for here, for example, the app.route decorator is provided by Flask, and you can type in whatever URL you want to route to this function. And then this function is the functionality of your app. So here we are just talking about a hello world functionality. And in this case, we are just returning the string hello world that's going to be part of the HTTP response body. And there is a default headers that is being sent by Flask. So if you actually want to modify the headers and if you want to send more information or if you want to change the status code or anything, then you need to, instead of just sending return hello world, you actually need to build a response object and set values of status and location and other things that can go into the response, even the headers. We'll see this in more detail when we talk about the quiz engine application. And you also want to run the server that's actually going to accept connections, requests, HTTP requests. For that, you use app.run. You can also specify the IP and port inside this as function arguments for run if you want to run it on a specific port. This is an example of how the request object looks when you receive an HTTP request and you try to print that. So if you are an app developer and you will already have access to this request object, and request.dict will show you the content of the request that has come in. The request object provides various it provides all the information that's coming in into the as part of the request, the HTTP request. So if you want to check what the method is, if you want to check whether it is a form, if you want to check if the content type is JSON, or if you want to get the contents of that, if you want to find out what the URL that was typed is, you have to access the request object, and you can see the different examples here. Like request.method is get, username is request.form, accessing the username key. So it's basically a dictionary and gives you all the information. We saw the example of a very simple URL routing where you were only routing a slash or any typical address to a function that you're defining inside your app. Here the / is being routed onto the function index and returning hello world. But you can also, if you want to have multiple rules for a particular address, for example, if you want to say www.something.com/ or www.something.com/index.html, if you want both of them to reach the same function, this is how you do multiple rules. You can also have dynamic URL rules where there are some variables in your URL, and those variables can actually be accessed as arguments to the function that you map it to. You can also restrict a particular URL to only certain methods, like this URL, for example. If the user sends a method that is other than get or post, it's going to give an error. This is an example that I've printed from code for the response object. You can see there is a headers part and there is an HTML on top. You can use, like I said, you can return response as an HTML file, as an HTML template, or it can be a JSON object. It can be returned it can be an image file. Jinja templates allow you to enter the name of the template file. For example, here it is welcome.html, and then the variable names that you want to dynamically change depending upon the requests. All that part goes into the context. So there is a template file name that you need to enter, and there is all the other dynamic context that you need to enter. And then when you do return render template welcome.html comma username is equal to username, what it's basically doing is it's going to search for that file welcome.html in the templates folder, and then you can see the templates file right below the welcome.html file, and then it's going to use the value of the username from your code, from the Python code in your application, and plug it into the welcome.html file. If you have worked with front end and templating, then this should come easy to you. Otherwise, you can just look for Jinja 2 templates online, and there's a lot of information available on their official website. So for example, here in this, if you see the welcome.html file, there's a welcome username with 2 braces on both sides. That is where the actual value of the username is going to be plugged in. So if the user, if one user requests for this web, types a particular URL, then he's going to get, welcome user 1 if that is his name, and if there's another user who's user 2, he's going to get welcome user 2. So that is how this templating is helping you to dynamically change the response. Just like I said, JavaScript object notation, JSON, is becoming pretty popular, especially if you are using code to access the response in the form of data structures. It's typically the basic data structure is like a list of dicts or a dict of lists, and you can nest them one inside the other. And in the response, then you have to specify content type as application JSON. You have to JSONify your file, so your data, like quizzes, for example, it'll be a dict, for example, and you need to convert that into a typical JSON format, so you can use JSONify, and there are other functions, methods, libraries that are available to do that. We will now talk about the quiz engine web app, and we can see the whole implementation in detail. So we understand how we can use Flask to build a small website like that. What this web app does is basically allows a user to log in. So the user goes to the website, the user logs in, and he gets a list of quizzes that he can take. And then so the quizzes have questions and multiple choice answers, and he can select the ones that he or she thinks are correct. And then the web app provides, then he presses submit, and the web app provides the user with the answers, the correct answers. And at the end of it, the user can see the score. So it's a simple web app. It uses Flask. It uses Jinja templates. I have not put in much effort in the way the app looks. Like, I mean, not on the look or the design of the website, but more on the functionality. So it's a simple snapshot of a basic quiz engine application, and I think we will be doing this as part of part 3. So you need to access the link to part 3 to just understand this, how this implementation was written. Also, before I finish, this is the link that you can go to access code for the web app.